This is Reasonable Doubt with your hosts, Mark Geragos and Adam Carolla.
Yeah, get it on. Got to get on the church. We're going to get it on. Welcome to the best hour or so in the universe. It's Reasonable Doubt. I'm Adam Carolla. It's Mark Geragos, still in New York City. Mark, what's on your mind?
Boy, I'll tell you, there's a lot going on today in the world of criminal law. The Elizabeth Holmes case started this morning. Well, they picked a jury before, but opening statements in the first witness this morning. Also, developments since we just talked about the Murdaugh case, and looks like Adam, as usual, the crystal brain was had a crystal ball this time, because people are already saying that in that case, is for those who haven't been in the weeds on it, that's the lawyer whose son and wife were murdered. And then he was, on Friday of last week, resigned from the bar, was disbarred temporarily pending final resolution this morning. And then last Friday, after resigning from his firm, supposedly got shot at while his car had a flat tire. Gary can bring you up to speed on a couple of developments on that today, not the least of which is a run flat tire. Is that right, Gary?
That's exactly right. That car does not have a spare, so you would not pull over to change a tire because there's not one to change. That car can drive 50 miles on a run flat spare, even if it's deflated.
Funny. I knew it was 50 miles when somebody brought that up.
And then the other thing is,
look, I'll put my Mark Geragos hat on. And I would say, ladies and gentlemen, my client did not memorize the manual for the car before he left. How many people in the jury even know where your spare tire is? How many people know how to work the jack? You know, he's old school. He saw the indicator on the dash. He thought he had a problem. He pulled over. He wasn't aware that he had a run flat tire on the car.
I'll concede that. How exactly do you explain your client being the owner of the knife that was used to slash the tire? They have now discovered the knife, and they have associated it with him.
That's what I always tell the clients. I always tell the clients, I hate those bad facts.
Yeah.
Those bad facts.
Yeah, well, that is a bad fact if he's the owner, in fact, of the knife.
Maybe he went out of the car and he picked up the knife to take a look at it. Mm-hmm. And it turned out that was the knife that was used, and just has his DNA or fingerprints on.
Maybe Mark Furman planted the knife. That could have happened.
Maybe the cops planted it. So, what do you? What's your working theory? Have you given it any thought since the 24 hours have passed since we first talked about this?
I think it's time for him to throw himself on the mercy of the court of addiction. I think at this point you go, look, I'm addicted to drugs. I'm out of my mind. You know, the things I did when I was blacked out, the decisions I made, I was in the throes of addiction. I really can't be held responsible for what my actions were when I was in the throes of addiction. I think at some point he's going to just steer it toward that. You know, enough with the charade of I wasn't there, it wasn't me, or it wasn't my knife. I think at a certain point they'll turn it toward he was just not in his right mind.
Yeah. The question that I think I would need to know if I'm the lawyer is how long had this alleged embezzlement, and I say alleged, they haven't proven anything, and God knows most of the leaks you get in investigations are usually law enforcement, so who knows if they're selectively leaking accurate or inaccurate. But obviously he resigned from the bar. Gary and I were saying better late than never. The South Carolina Supreme Court today entered the disbarment order, and like I said, temporarily, but there's obviously a prima facie case that some kind of purloining was taking place. If that's the case, I'd want to know what this forensic accountant is saying. How long has that been going on? If that's been going on, allegedly, since well before the murder of the wife and the son, it sure leads me to believe that there is a connection there circumstantially between those things. I mean, that he had been either caught or exposed, or he understood what the magnitude of the murder or the threat was at that point. Don't you think?
I do. You alluded to a case where they're doing jury selection as we speak, but I don't know what the case you alluded to was.
The case is Elizabeth Holmes, who was the founder and CEO, self-made at one point billionaire of a company called Theranos.
Oh, that case.
Yeah. So not only do they complete jury selection, but it's federal court, so you move quick. But they did opening statements and actually called a witness all this morning. And basically the case or the trial, which is, I mean, she's actually got, Gary, do you have any of those pictures of her fans that were lining up to get into the courtroom today?
Yeah, just give me a second. I'll put them up.
She was the subject of that documentary, right? Am I
correct?
Got
correct.
the same woman, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was called, I think the documentary you're talking about is called Inventor.
Mm-hmm. So we can talk about that. We can also talk, I'm curious your take on this one. There's a brouhaha out there that's starting to start about the insurrection / riot, and they're going to stage a protest, and they're going to do it on behalf of folks that are still jailed who participated in the riot / insurrection. And I'm curious what your thoughts are on that. I mean, it seems like they're going to have all the security they need, plus some. Maybe they're going to put the fence back up around the Capitol building. That part seemed like an odd time to try for insurrection 2.0. I think everyone is primed and ready. My question for you is, what about the people that are still being held for the initial insurrection, which, by the way, they're not charging anyone with an insurrection. It's a lot of trespassing and on government property and interruption of government proceedings and things like that, but they're not being charged for an insurrection.
Nobody's been charged per se that I'm aware of under the specific statute or act in sedition. And there are a lot of people who have been clamoring for that all along. But at the same time that you're clamoring for prosecutors to do your bidding, whether, this is the same complaint, whether it's coming at me or defensively or offensively, using the criminal law for political purposes or for a political agenda, which I think, is always a fear. That's a dangerous road to go down. I mean, but you see it happen. You and I have talked about it endlessly. I'm kind of a little fascinated by the fact that I was reading today that 4 of the people who, I think this story is accurate, who we apparently traded for Murdaugh, who were in our custody, American custody, are now installed as the Taliban in the Taliban cabinet.
That's correct.
Think about that for a second. They were criminals of the worst order. You can call them terrorists, you can call them whatever you want, but we had them. We traded them for Murdaugh. And
now went AWOL. He just sort of wandered off into the desert and was captured by the Taliban, I believe.
Correct. And interestingly, those 4 people we traded are now in the cabinet of the Taliban government, which is just wild to me. I mean, you talk about, doesn't that just, I mean, I read that story twice today because I just found it to be I couldn't even get my brain around it.
Right. CNN is not interested in that story. They're much more interested in Chewbacca Man and the threat that he poses to Americans. That's where they're at. They're at the idiots that were involved with the riot. Those are the real. That's the American Taliban, the white supremacists. But here's my question. I said all along the thing was a riot. Everyone yelled at me and said it was an insurrection. I said it doesn't fit the standard of an insurrection. I've seen the video. It's a riot. They then accused me of being apologetic for whatever whatever happened. I said, I'm just calling it what it is. Then the FBI comes out and says it's not an insurrection. It's basically a riot. And then nobody's charged for an insurrection. But then CNN just moves on. They just go, well, after the insurrection at the Capitol. Well, you guys labeled it an insurrection, and then the information came out, and it wasn't an insurrection. But you're just going to keep going down that road. And now there's a bunch of people being held going on, 8 months. And I think there's some people that are saying you shouldn't be able to hold these people indefinitely. And they're going, the same people that never stop belly aching about people being held, by the way, longer than they should, are all for these people being held. And my thing is, let's get consistent. If they're being held for trespassing, then they could probably get out. Now, I don't know, Gary can look how many people are still being held, but they are planning a rally on behalf of those.
It's called
people.
Justice for J6, and it's September 18th, I believe.
September 18th.
I'm still looking for how many people being held.
Mm-hmm.
And what is the rally? Oh, the rally is, I don't know. The hypocrisy knows no bounds on either side. I mean, you're making an argument that I think has a lot of truth to it, and namely the people who are wanted to eliminate cash bail and wanted criminal justice reform, and rightfully so. Nobody thinks that that's more important than I suppose I do. I've spent my entire adult life in that system. And then I saw today that some of those same websites that were talking about what you just talked about are also complaining about a guy who was released because Kamala Harris had supported a no bail fund or a bail fund during the height of the summer unrest. And it's like, wait, do you understand the irony that you're talking about? You want these people not being held, and then and now you're condemning the no bail policy. At least just be consistent, right?
Well, it's just basically we want who we want incarcerated or kept, and we don't want who we don't want, depending on what side they are. It's sort of insane. I was just talking to Andy No on my program the other day. He's the journalist who is covering
Harmeet's client, right?
He must be Harmeet's client. And he's beaten severely twice by Antifa. And he's basically trying to blow the lid off Antifa by covering Antifa. And for some reason, the entire left has turned against Andy No. Now, Antifa hates Trump, but other than that, I don't think they agree on a lot, meaning the left and Antifa. Antifa are thugs. They're burning down buildings. They're battering people in the street. They're stabbing people. There's murders involved here. When did Antifa become your cause celeb left? Well, they don't like Trump, so we like Antifa. They never say that, but there's no other reason why you should be attacking Andy No, who is a good journalist, who's doing some of the last business of journalism blowing up on the hotline, Mark.
JV.
Yeah.
If it's Jussie, put him on speaker.
Ace, I can jump in here while we let the phone
you.
endlessly ring, because apparently Mark can't silence it. The Justice for J6 rally is not only the people that are still being incarcerated. Is this the world's longest ringtone?
I've
feel
never
like
seen anything like it, right?
Yeah, sorry.
They're focused on not only the people who are still being held, but all 600 or so that were dragged into court as a result of their presence. So they're going to protest that.
Yeah, it's a good example of the law being sort of weaponized, or the Department of Justice being weaponized.
Oh, my God.
There he goes again. If it's Colin, we'll talk to.
Yeah.
So they're planning a rally. I think CNN is doing all their hand-wringing thing about a repeat of the insurrection, but I think no reasonable person thinks that's on the table. But yes,
I was just going to say it's a perfect way to characterize the weaponization of the criminal law, and you should be afraid of it, because if you lose power, guess what? Then they're coming for you. It's
right.
That becomes, and everything that you're rooting for when it's directed at who you don't agree with can be redirected right in your direction.
Well, we definitely got that going on. I am curious. So back to the case where they've done jury selection.
Right. And Gary had showed it up. Gary put it up again. Apparently, what were they saying today, Gary? The people were having a lot of fun with this. So she was famous for kind of, I guess, a hat tip to Steve Jobs. She would always wear a single outfit, and that's kind of her hair do or don't. And those were people lined up to get in there. They basically, one of the things that I saw it described today as fraud versus failure. That was the way they set up the opening. The government arguing that she committed a fraud when she ran out of money and she was lying and cheating, their words, to get more money to keep the place afloat. The defense, I think ably, described the fact that she had 1 year of college, had dropped out, which is also similar to some other famous billionaires. She'd been at Stanford. She met this older man who also was indicted with her, but their cases were severed because she potentially will take the stand and testify that he was abusive to her, and they don't want that to happen in the same trial. But they talked about how she had people working for her. She had these fantastic people on her board. The General Mattis, I believe, was on her board. I think Henry Kissinger was either on the board or an investor. Rupert Murdoch was an investor. And basically what she had was, with a simple pinprick and a couple of drops of blood, she was touting the ability to get all kinds of tests done and get the tests done at affordable rates. And I think at one point, they even mentioned that she had done a deal with Walmart or CVS or one of the large pharmacies.
It was Walgreens.
Was it Walgreens? Yeah. And so that was today kind of a stark contrast. And I liked the theme of the defense. Failure is not fraud. Basically, just because she tried, she never cashed out, I think is an important fact. I mean, she was she had the jinx, you've heard of the Sports Illustrated jinx. She had the Forbes jinx, cover jinx.
Wait, I've heard of the Madden jinx, but probably Sports Illustrated cover too.
There's a Sports Illustrated. The Madden one's the much better, more ironclad one to point to, but there is, over the years, if you look at Sports Illustrated, a lot of injuries with cover.
Belt and suspenders over here doesn't know about the newfangled video games. That's for the kids.
The Madden curse is the one.
He buys his periodicals down at the stand, 25 cents, 22 skidoo.
I remember when that and a nickel get you a good cup of coffee.
Yeah, so the jinx of Sports Illustrated, the jinx of Madden is when you make the cover. That's when you get the compound fracture in Game 3 of the NFL, and you're out for the season. So what was she? I mean, she was an entrepreneur. She had this technology, but I don't think the technology never really panned out, right? But it was promising.
There were the government was focusing on the fact that it didn't work, that there were failures. The defense, I think, countered effectively. If you believe what you read, obviously they don't live stream this because it's federal court, but the defense argued, look, if there were, I forget what it was, I'll just don't hold me to it, but 8 million tests, you're going to have some false positives, or you're going to have, they're going to have somebody take the stand. The judge said they could not one of the things the government wanted to do is put somebody on the stand to talk about the trauma of getting a false positive on an HIV test. The judge said, we're not going to hear about your trauma from that, which might remind you of one of the things that I kept saying during the Chauvin trial,
right,
is why were they letting in witnesses' trauma into a trial about somebody's state of mind? And here the judge...
Yeah, the prosecution started with the 9-year-old girl who saw George Floyd being choked out, and how did it make you feel? And right. you railed against that, which is sort of, it's hearsay. I mean, if you're a human being, you felt horrible, but that's not what
right.
the case is. Right.
It's not what the case, and it's, there's the old expression in the law, more prejudicial than probative. The one thing a judge is supposed to do is balance evidence that is arguably admissible, but way too prejudicial and doesn't outweigh or does outweigh the probative value. So the judge in this case, I think, made the right decision. But I think there's a compelling argument there. I mean, I take a look at what we've been experiencing over the last 2 years with COVID. There are all kinds of false positives with that. There's all kinds of tests that got emergency authorization that turned out not to have a highly accurate percentage of in double-blind studies. And so here it's the same thing. You're making the argument, okay, she failed. She did not, and I'll go back to this because I think it's compelling. If she was worth $1 billion on paper, it's not like she cashed out. She didn't sell. She didn't, liquidate. She took the ride up and took the ride down.
Well, they're going to have to prove that she knew what she was selling was flawed, I guess. And then the second part is they're going to have to prove that she got the money and she was going to do something with the money other than put it back into the company or repay the investors. So, again, back to that argument where she was a failure, but not a fraud. That seems
not
like
a fraud.
That seems
exactly.
like the argument to make. Yeah, I know. And, I was just arguing with someone on cable yesterday about COVID and what we knew and what they know and what everyone knows. And, I was saying that folks that speak are allowed to give their opinions and then the public at large can listen or not. Their big argument is, yeah, but when people give their opinions, people listen and they could do dangerous things. I said, okay, but, do you want to live in a world where people can't give their opinions? And then we started talking about vaccines, which I'm for, but I got a 15-year-old son, and I'm not for him being vaccinated because he's healthy, and there's no evidence that suggests he should be vaccinated. And then they said, yeah, I'm arguing they should be vaccinated, not me, but them, but that's what the CDC says. And I said, yeah, but the CDC said you should get vaccinated even if you had COVID and beat COVID because you needed to get vaccinated anyway. And that turned out to be shit science. It turns out you have a much higher immune system from having COVID, having the antibodies, and beating COVID. So why does this become the gold standard all of a sudden? Half the shit the CDC and Fauci said 10 minutes ago is null and void now. So don't trot that shit out to me. All right. Sorry, let me hit a quick spot.
It's okay.
Here.
I've got a lot to say in response to that when you come to the other side.
I'll tease that. Trust and will. Many of you are just starting out, buying homes, having babies, building wealth. Add secure your family's future to your to-do list. Trustandwill.com. For as little as $39, you can set up an estate plan, nominate guardians for your kids, determine who gets your stuff, and plan for future medical care, all from the comfort of your home. A traditional estate attorney can cost thousands. Using a one-size-fits-all template is not specialized enough. Trust and Will documents are designed by estate planning experts and customized for your estate. Live customer support 7 days a week. Look, we've figured it out. I've told you, if you can get the furniture at IKEA, do it. It's a lot cheaper than having a custom carpenter build you a dining table, and this is the same thing. Save a ton, avoid the billable hours. go with Trust and Will, right, Gary?
That's right. Gain peace of mind at trustandwill.com/doubt and get 10% off plus free shipping of your customized legal documents. Don't wait. Go right now. This is really important. Get 10% off plus free shipping at trustandwill.com/doubt. That's trustandwill.com/doubt.
So, Mark,
it's so interesting you say this, because I was having the same discussion this morning that I couldn't be more pro-vaccine. I couldn't be more that we need to get to a point where we deal with this problem effectively and get on with our lives and everything else. At the same time, it's incredibly frightening to me from a free speech and a scientific. When I was talking with an expert, a scientific expert, and we were bemoaning the fact that there is a certain orthodoxy to what is happening. And if you're outside of that orthodoxy on day one, and then day 180 or day 270, it turns out you were right, but you were stifled and there wasn't that give and take. That's anti-science in a way. The whole idea is some of the greatest discoveries of all time have been basically mistakes in a theory by a scientist that were later kind of adopted or kind of transmuted. And this idea that, and we have lived it, and we've talked about it endlessly, they kept talking about the transmission outdoors. And so we had to bring everybody indoors. But we know what the law of unintended consequences were. They didn't have any evidence of that. And in fact, what that ended up doing is increasing the spread of COVID, period. End of story. Does that mean you can't articulate that at a certain point in time because it's not acceptable? And by the way, do you understand that the scientific method is the opposite of that?
Yeah, and also this thing, I'll tell you where it happens. It's now kind of universal. Steering it back to the insurrection. Half the country says it's an insurrection. I say it's a riot, and then all of a sudden I become a denier. You know what I mean? And it's like, how am I denying a riot? I'm trying to clearly label something. So if I say my mom's 88, my dad's turning 90. They should definitely get vaccine. Most people should get vaccines. I have a 15-year-old son. I've talked to Dr. Bruce. I've talked to Dr. Drew. They don't think that my 15-year-old son needs to be vaccinated. So, okay, I have a mind that is semi-fluid. I can live in a world where my aged parents need to get the vaccine or my young, healthy son doesn't. That makes me a vaccine denier?
Yeah. And by the way, I've got, the people who are at risk, and I won't name this particular kid because I love him to death. But he's a heavy kid. He's a husky kid. And he got it. He got COVID. He's been fighting it for the last week, and he's way too young to have had the vaccine. But what would have been interesting is if with this kind of, having a 1 year head start, if he had thinned out a little bit, would he have had the bad reaction or reaction that he's currently going through?
Talking about this with an Armo doctor last night up the hill from your house, several hundred yards, doing the father-son fantasy football draft. He's an ER doctor. Armo, but we still get along. And I mean, we're not friends, obviously, but right. It's casual, we have an agreement. The point is I was talking about what's going on with COVID, and he said he works out here in SoCal. Said it was spiked about 2 weeks ago. Now it's pretty flat, not a lot of action. And then he paused and he said, though, do have a lot of young people coming in. And I said, oh, a lot of young people coming into the hospital? And he said, oh, they're all morbidly obese. They're all heavy. And I said, yeah, that's it. That could have been a message that we pushed out there instead of, wear paper masks and, eat your Thanksgiving out in the yard and whatever else kind of fakakta protocols, spray down.
You got to all go inside where we can transmit it even better. So
right.
It's really, I mean, when you take a look at the statistics and you talk I talk all the time to doctors like you do, even non-Armos, who come to the same conclusion. I mean, it's almost, the correlation is somewhere at 80 to 85% for those who have bad results, bad outcomes, to obesity. I mean, I mentioned this to you before. I had a sociology anthropology professor in Wyatt McGaffey, who in college 40 years ago. 45 years ago, McGaffey used to say, your best theory on its best day is never going to account for 80% of the data. And here you've got a theory that does account. I mean, it puts the lie to Wyatt McGaffey. This actually accounts for 80% of the data.
Well, speaking of COVID, there's been some recent rumblings about Fauci and maybe some more paperwork or something that has come out.
Yeah, there was
unredacted stuff or something.
I haven't had a chance to sift through it all yet, but it was news today that 900 pages of documents came out under the Freedom of Information Act that were about the grants given to EcoHealth Alliance, which is the nonprofit that funneled federal funds to the Wuhan Institute. So there will be news.
And it was on, apparently, and I don't want to spread fake news because, like Gary, I haven't gone through it yet. But if you read the headline, it had to do with gain of function.
Right.
And famously, that exchange that went viral between Rand Paul and Fauci. And there is something that is just, there's something, I've jokingly or not so jokingly called this thing the Vinny virus. And the way that it mutates and the way that it takes hold in certain kind of segments of the population, I want to hear discussion on this. I am interested in this. I think it's fascinating. I mean, if it's a once in 100-year phenomena, then why shouldn't we be able to hear all voices, including conspiracy theorists and crazies? Because it appears to me that there is a lot more going on in terms of the mutation, in terms of who gets hit with this thing, in terms of whether or not this the virus itself could have been engineered or was trying to be engineered? And if so, why? I mean, don't you want to know those things?
Well, I do. I think something that sort of came and went. I'm looking at Gary again because he's got a computer, but I think the Biden administration gave a 90-day window to look into the origins of it. And the deadline just kind of came and went. And the answer was, well, China's not going to cooperate, so what do you know? Like, we don't know anything because we're relying on China. We're in a great position. We're relying on the Taliban to help us round up Americans and get them out of Afghanistan. We're relying on China to give us the truth about a virus that emanated from China. So I say good luck.
At the same time that China is now forming an alliance with the Taliban.
So good luck getting any good info out of China. I would suggest that if we would like to find out what happened vis-a-vis the potential lab leak, then we should mount our own investigation, which we're pretty good at, and maybe not rely on China's not being as transparent as we would like. Now, my theory is we're not particularly interested in where this came from, and I'll give you an example. Could you imagine, just imagine, if CNN and MSNBC and USA Today and the LA Times and the New York Times and Rachel Maddow and Anderson Cooper and Don Lemon were as interested in where the virus emanated from as they were in Russian collusion vis-a-vis the Trump candidacy and the Trump presidency? Could you imagine if they had 1/10 the interest in where this thing emanated from versus the Steele dossier or many other things involving Russia and Russia aiding Donald Trump. If they had 1/10 the interest, then we would probably get some answers. But I don't believe there's any will there. And I don't know why, but there doesn't seem to be any will from the Biden administration or just about anyone in power to figure out where this thing came from, save guys like Rand Paul or Jim Jordan or guys like that. Thoughts?
Well, the problem is with guys like Jim Jordan is that they take a contrarian position to anything Democrat and aren't, in my opinion, aren't consistent or are hypocritical. I mean, if you can aim your fire at both sides and criticize both, then I think that there's and criticize in the sense of exercise critical thinking.
I agree. I don't want to cut you off. I agree.
Yeah.
Jim Jordan is going to do that to Nancy Pelosi, and Nancy Pelosi is going to do that to Jim Jordan. But what I'm saying is what about Antifa? Can't we just agree that Antifa is bad? Why does that turn into sort of political volleyball? Why is there one side that semi-defends Antifa and their behavior and then Jim Jordan? And I would say the same thing about the Chinese virus leak. Okay, Jim Jordan thinks it came from a virology lab in China. Nancy Pelosi says he's wrong. Well, what's Nancy Pelosi doing? Why aren't we both trying to figure out who this is and what's going on? I get there's abortion, there's voter ID, there's all the things we argue about constantly as we sort of try to maneuver for political space. But why has the virus and where it, and if it possibly came from a leak, why is that Jim Jordan against Nancy Pelosi? Why isn't that Nancy Pelosi and Jim Jordan wanting to find out where the leak came from?
Look, it's the same. I would use the same argument, because we've been talking about it, on the January 6th committee. Why wouldn't both sides want to do or have revealed or jointly investigate that? Because somehow it morphed into a political axe to grind at some point, and then there's fundraising appeals after it. I don't know about you, but I'm on so many of these email blasts for fundraising on the backs of these so-called social issues that it really starts to feel like there isn't any really there isn't a principled kind of stand, right or left. It's just, what can I raise money off of and fire up the base?
Well, once again, as far as January 6th, obviously the Democrats want to make some hay while the sun is shining on that subject. Understandably, Republicans would like to downplay it, understandably, but I'm still circling back to where a virus emanated from that devastated our economy.
Right, and which, by the way, is going to have an impact for potentially a generation.
Agree. All right, so I'm going to tease this, which is, I will say this, and I'll put it to you this way. I'll let you sort of emulsify in your brain, and I'll tease it when I do a Geico spot. But here's what I'm saying. And here's kind of how I look at things. If you would have stopped somebody, if you would have stopped me a year and a half ago and said, I think the virus came from a lab. I think it was gain of function. I think Fauci may have had his fingerprints on this thing, and I think this thing's a scandal. You got hold of me a year and a half ago, I would have went, please get out of here, crazy. Put your tinfoil hat on. Okay. Then if you would have got hold of me 6 months ago and said that, I would have went, yeah, it does make a little more sense. It came from a lab versus pangolin, and I could see that. But I don't know. Fauci, come on, give me a break. Well, if you got hold of me today, I'd go, well, there might be, Fauci may have his fingerprints on this. Maybe it came from the lab. You can see which direction this thing is starting to move, is I guess what I'm saying. And when something starts heading a direction, it can be stopped. There can be, oh no, study came out, found out. We found a bat was infected with COVID in a nearby village or whatever. Nothing has ever really stopped. As a matter of fact, as more documents get released and more freedom of information and more discussions, the more it just kind of keeps heading that way. So I guess what I'm asking you to do, Mark, is fast forward a year from now. Where might we be? Where might we be with Fauci in this as more stuff comes out, or things that were redacted become unredacted and things of that nature? First, I will hit Geico. Do you own? Do you rent? Will you do one or the other? And then there's your automotive policy. How about you get your bundle working? That's right. Go to geico.com, take your homeowners or your renter's insurance, put it together with your automotive policy. It's a good thing, too, because you already have so much to do around the house. So you go to geico.com, you get a quote, you see just how much you could save and how easy it is when you go to geico.com. That is geico.com. So what do you think?
The crazy thing is if it turns out that there's information that was had, and I've got to believe that somebody briefed the president, and that's one of the reasons President Biden, when he came in, and that's one of the reasons he issued that 90-day order, because I don't know, did they know that there was a FOIA request? Did they know they were going to have to comply? Did they know there was that there was stuff that had been withheld? I'll tell you, I'll take a look through that. I'll scan that 900 pages. I want to take a look at it because it's fascinating to me if we were just led along like lemmings. And I will keep going back to this. I'll never forget the day I believe it was in December the 8th of last year, where the judge in LA County issued a tentative ruling, 53 pages, and said there was no evidence, none whatsoever, about transmission outdoors. And when some intrepid reporter who later took down the post, but asked I believe it was Dr. Gandhi, said, is that true? And yeah, it is. But what we're trying to do is to get people to go inside. Why am I fixated on that? Because that is emblematic of a patronizing, condescending, frankly, puerile attempt to just manipulate folks without information or on disinformation.
Yeah, well, I think that's kind of where we're at now. We've decided that they know better. And again, it has become, see, the scary part is the relationship with the government and the powers that be is not a peer relationship anymore. It's a parent-child relationship.
Correct.
And anyone,
Correct.
There's not a person that has kids that doesn't know it's okay to lie to the kids about things you want them to do, because that's the relationship a parent has with a kid. You do your homework, or the boogeyman's going to get you, or you eat your vegetables because there's a kid in China who would have had those vegetables and now they're starving, and blah, blah, blah. Those are the things we know, and we get it. Nobody says to a young kid, you know, you can take up smoking. Statistically, it's probably not going to kill you, but there's a small chance it could. Like, no one talks that way. You go start smoking, you don't see your 21st birthday. And we can all agree that there's something noble in that, because we're looking at the bottom line. You don't want your kid to smoke. We're going to tell them this. But at a certain point, but you don't do that with other adults. See, with other adults, you have to tell them the truth, and then they get to make their decisions. Now, somehow the government has become the adult, and we've become the children.
And by the way, one of the reasons if people would understand, once again, it's the law of unintended consequences. One of the reasons that populism has become not just an American phenomena, but an international phenomena is precisely that. I mean, the whole idea that you can say elites do this or elites do that, and that resonates with a substantial amount of the population is precisely a byproduct of the kind of paternalistic approach that people take.
Yeah, and I think it's been embraced as well by a lot of the news outlets and maybe electronic media, and I think that's part of what's going on in this particular chapter in our history. Now, I know Mark's got some sushi with his name on it because he's got to fly. Because I'm doing the math, Mark. You're not going to work at this late hour, right?
You would be surprised. I'm on recess from a mediation. I've been on the mediation for most of the day. We actually surprisingly have made progress, but I've got to go back in because it's the mediator is on the West Coast and I'm on the East Coast.
Okay, well,
I'm actually earning a living.
All right, well, knock it out of the park, man.
I will. I'm gonna take off, but wish me well, and hopefully you never hear about this resolution because that means we settled it and my client gets compensated and all is well.
Well, I'll catch up with you over a little Don Julio, and we'll get to the bottom of it next time I see you, my friend.
Goodbye, you guys.
Safe
Bye,
travels.
Barry.
I will hit my last spot, which is better.
Yeah, you
help.
should have known that it was work. I've got a collared shirt on for you today.
I know, but no tie, so I was kind of wondering. All right, BetterHelp, my friend.
Thank you.
This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp. Is something interfering with your happiness or preventing you from achieving your goals? Yeah, I think there's a lot of that going around these days. BetterHelp will assess your needs and match you with a licensed professional therapist. Start communicating in under 48 hours. Easy and free to change counselors if needed. Not a crisis line or self-help. It's professional counseling done securely online. Log in and send a message to your counselor, and you'll get a timely, thoughtful response. Plus, schedule weekly video or phone sessions. No uncomfortable waiting room. BetterHelp. Once you start having a happier life today. It's BetterHelp, right, Gary?
That's right. Visit BetterHelp.com/reasonabledoubt. That's better, HELP. And join the over 2 million people who have taken charge of their mental health with the help of an experienced professional. In fact, so many people have been using BetterHelp that they are recruiting additional therapists in all 50 states. Special offer for Reasonable Doubt listeners. Get 10% off your first month at BetterHelp.com/reasonabledoubt.
All right. Friday. That'll be September 10th, this Friday. That is Royal Oak, Michigan, Royal Oak Music Theater. I'll be doing stand-up there. Then Saturday, going off to Kansas City, Arvest Bank Theater. You can go to AdamCarolla.com for all the live shows, and you can check out all our offerings for Chassis and our Chassis channel on Pluto TV 687. So until next time, Adam Carolla for Mark Geragos saying mahalo.
Thanks for listening to Reasonable Doubt. Tune in next Saturday for an all-new episode.